this Memorial Day. Men who stood tall with pride, the American way. Duty beckoned, they met the call. All gave some gave all. Remember those brave warriors, place flags in his short grave. Men who fought.
Councilman Tony Pranzatelli, Councilman John Buckley. Now our keynote speaker is Councilman and Somerset County Freeholder candidate Tony Pranzatelli.
Thank you. Before I start, I'd like to thank Brad Higginbottom for the opportunity to speak today, and let's give him a hand for putting this whole parade and ceremony together for us. Thanks a lot. You always come through. I also would like to thank you for joining us on a day when we take time to honor the brave men and women who sacrificed for America. When I think of our veterans, I think of what Winston Churchill said so many years ago. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. Honoring those brave veterans who served us is a process that demands more than just one day. It demands more than just slogans and hollow rhetoric. Honoring them demands that we set partisanship aside and come together as one nation, indivisible. Today is the day we memorialize our heroes, those who never returned and those who did. And believe me, they are heroes. Heroes who never asked for help because they were the helpers. Heroes who never asked for a handout because they cared for us. But those heroes also have needs, and those needs should not be ignored. We have the obligation as citizens, as a nation, to be engaged in the decisions that affect our veterans, decisions that affect the care and well-being of our returning heroes. To merely say, I support the troops, without helping to make that support a tangible reality is a hollow statement that degrades us as a country. We need to encourage support from the public sector, whether it's the President of the United States, a congressperson, or a councilperson from the borough of Brook. We have the responsibility as caring citizens to inform ourselves about where our elected officials stand and encourage them when it comes to the welfare of our veterans. We need support from nonprofits. As members of churches, synagogues, rotaries, chambers of commerce, and PTOs, we have the responsibility to advocate for programs that benefit our heroes. And we also need support from the private sector. If you own or manage a business, when a vet comes asking for employment, you must give them a fair shake. And as consumers, we need to support businesses and corporations that do just that. I'm not a veteran, but like many of you, I grew up surrounded by these brave souls. Our relatives and neighbors that served in service taught us by example of how real heroes behave. Over the years, we've also learned that these great Americans have needs, and these needs often go unmet. We know they sacrificed. We know what they went through. Many of them come from, and still come from, the poorest families. Put yourself in their shoes. Do you remember when you turned 18? If you were lucky, you might have just started college. At 18, these veterans took a harder path. They went off to boot camp. In your early adult years, you may have started your first job, learned a trade, or maybe started a small business. Many of these young vets were off somewhere in the world, a foreign country, possibly in combat, often in grave danger. Now, in your mid to early 20s, you may have settled down, you may have started your family. These men and women were far from their families, wondering if they would ever get the opportunity to marry and raise their own children. And when those men and women who fought and defended our freedoms returned, they were just glad to be home. And if you asked them the question, how are you doing? The answer always was, I'm doing just fine. But in truth, it wasn't always just fine. I know for a fact that it always wasn't fine. To this day, my dad, a World War II combat vet, wakes up in the middle of the night with a loud scream from a horrible battlefield memory from over 60 years ago. Many of these heroes are now just starting to talk about their wartime experiences. And I'm sure there's some things that are just too painful to remember. So it is our duty as citizens, as family, and as friends to comfort as well as celebrate, to support these veterans every single day and not just once a year. You can do that by supporting the local VA hospitals. You can support the GI Bill and the education and training programs for returning service members. You can support incentives for the private sector to hire them with fair jobs and fair wages and benefits. And you can volunteer your time through nonprofits that help our veterans as well as our community. I plan, and I hope you do too, to enjoy this wonderful Memorial Day. Let's go home, let's fire up the grills, and wave Old Glory high as we honor our veterans, the living and the dead, and the freedoms that they helped preserve for us. But all I ask is when the parade is over, and the grill is cold, and the food's been put away, let's continue to honor all our veterans, show them the respect they deserve, something more than a salute, something more than a parade, something more than a handshake. Remember, it won't be a handout, but instead, it's a hand up, and it's giving back just a little to the few to whom we owe so much. God bless the veterans, God bless Bound Brook, God bless America, happy Memorial Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. This time.
We remember those departed on this Memorial Day. Men who stood tall with pride, the American